Ron Resch, President and CEO of the Solar Energy Industries Association, SEIA.org, is with us in the studio. Ron, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
And as much as I like with the tobacco lobby, or the NRA, the official lobbying arm of the weapons industry, sometimes people aren't all that fond of. Sometimes I'm not all that fond of lobbying and industry organizations, but frankly, your industry, and I also put the small-scale agriculture industry in this category, are the industries that I think actually could save this country in many ways. And if you can make a buck doing it, good on you. I'm all in favor of that. Hopefully we can make a buck doing good radio too. So tell me about the solar industry. The Solar Energy Industries Association.
Sure, Tom. We're the National Trade Association for the solar industry, and in that capacity, we represent all technologies in all markets. So we represent photovoltaics, solar heating and cooling, as well as concentrating solar power. And solar is deployed really now in 3 different marketplaces: residential, commercial, and utility scale. And what our association does is focuses on policy in order to gain access to markets. So as you can imagine, the electricity market is heavily regulated and designed in large part to protect the government-protected utility. So we're trying to get access to the electricity marketplace so you, as a homeowner, could put solar on your roof and
Right.
You could participate in the electricity market.
Right. And I'm seeing the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, at the behest of the fossil fuel industry that largely, the Koch Industries is one of their major funders. And in fact, they were there at the founding back in the late 70s, early 80s, is proposing model legislation for the states, and I believe one state has passed it, that would actually tax you if you put solar panels on your roof on the electricity that you might sell back to the grid, or make it so onerous or so difficult for you. So, we have dueling industry associations here. Do you think of yourself as at war with the fossil fuel industry?
What I'm really trying to do is make sure we have a level playing field with the fossil fuel industry, that the subsidies that they've been getting since
they've been getting subsidies
1916 for oil, 1930s for the coal, 1950s for the nuclear industry. Yeah. We just want to make sure that we have a level playing field so that solar has an ability to compete with these technologies. And right now we don't. And so are we at war? Not necessarily. Can we compete? Absolutely. But we have to have access to the markets. And so our focus is really on making sure utilities and the public service commissions in various states have the rules in place that allow competition, which is really a free market ideal here in America.
It's interesting. I've never heard those individual years for when the subsidies kicked in for those individual industries. Can you tell me about each one of those?
Sure. The oil industry received their first permanent subsidy for production of oil in 1916.
Was that the oil depletion allowance? Or
oil depletion allowance, and there was 2 others that came in place at that point. In the 30s was when you first started to have subsidies for the coal industry. The nuclear industry started getting permanent subsidies in the 50s, and then you keep going.
And then they got Price-Anderson.
And they got Price-Anderson in the 70s. And what we've done as a country, though, historically, is to support the energy industry. That has been a underlying policy.
Right, because energy powers everything.
For the last 100 years. Exactly. And what has allowed our economy to grow. It's allowed us to win World War II with massive hydro expansion. But ultimately, there's been no support for solar energy, even though it's our largest domestic source of energy in this country.
In other words, there's more potential solar power falling on the earth in the United States being just ignored than there is gas, oil, coal, nuclear combined?
Thousands of times over. If you go out and look at any rooftop that's just sitting there, they're baking in the sun. That is a domestic energy resource that is going grossly untapped. And it's available on literally every home, every business, every warehouse building, and vast areas of land that we have in the Southwest.
So, wow. To what extent do these other the fossil fuel industry and the nuclear industry, to what extent do they use their subsidies to then lobby members of Congress to maintain those subsidies, or even to inhibit subsidies to you guys?
So we got our first tax credit, if you will, in the 2005 energy bill. There was a Republican House, Republican Senate, and
George Bush
was president. So, pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
But they didn't give us a permanent tax credit. They gave us a 2-year tax credit. They basically said, okay, you put solar in your house, you get a 30% tax credit. It's capped at $2,000, and we'll give it to you for 2 years. Well, you really can't build an industry on 2 years. So we have chipped away and gotten a longer extension, but it's still only till the end of 2016. What we're finding now is because solar has scaled up and the costs have come down so dramatically, we really are a competitor to the fossil fuel industry. Yeah. We are a competitor to the utilities.
I have heard that if you were to strip all the subsidies, no subsidies for solar, no subsidies for oil, no subsidies for nuclear, do away with Price-Anderson. Well, you do away with Price-Anderson, first of all, every nuclear power plant in the country shuts down because nobody will insure them.
That's right.
And if you did away with all the subsidies for gas, oil, and coal, that all of them, and particularly if we were to start to capture the externalities, the cost of the cancers and the asthmas and reclaiming the land and the pet coke and all this other stuff, that suddenly all of these forms of energy would become massively more expensive than solar or wind, for that matter.
Absolutely.
And so it seems like there could be a two-path strategy here. One path is, hey, if you're going to continue giving subsidies to these guys, give them to us too. The other path could be, let's just stop all the subsidies. And that there would be different markets for both of them. The first might be more of the kind of conventional business street Republican, mainstream Democrat, and the latter would be more the libertarian right, and I don't know where the liberals on the left would stand. Probably they'd be more in favor of a Manhattan Project. Let's really super subsidize solar. At least that would be my position.
The bottom line is, if you were to do that and you were to address the externalities, and just kind of give you a perspective, the coal industry alone, when you look at particulate exposure from coal-fired power plants, costs Americans between $110 and $270 billion a year. Any subsidies going to the solar industry are, maybe, $1 or $2 billion a year. So that alone, if you were to get rid of and force the coal-fired power plants to reduce all of their emissions, including their carbon emissions,
or have them simply pay into a fund to pay for those externalities.
Yeah, that's great. You create that level playing field. Then there's no doubt that solar is the lowest cost form of energy in this country, and it's certainly the most abundant.
Wow.
Now, here's the other thing, Tom, which people tend not to think about, and that's the economic benefit of reinvesting in renewable energy. And solar in particular creates more jobs per megawatt than any other technology. And the reason why is you don't mine it, you don't drill for it, you manufacture it. So you manufacture it, and then you're taking these panels, and you've got an electrician who's installing them on a roof. So you've got somebody walking around on a roof, running wires, putting down framing systems, all the rest. These are good quality jobs. These are the kinds of jobs that put Americans back to work who lost their jobs during the downturn in the economy, be it from the housing industry, or they're the kinds of jobs that we make available to our returning troops from Iraq and Afghanistan who can continue to use their skills they learned in the military and apply them to domestic energy security.
So this could be, arguably, this could either be done entirely through the private sector if you either had the subsidies or the nuclear industry and the fossil fuel industry lost their subsidies, or it could be done with a new WPA kind of program.
The bottom line is this is not only energy policy, it's economic policy and environmental policy all at the same time. So rather than treating them separately, I think if we're smart as a country and we have real leadership, we start to say, okay, how do we level the playing field? How do we make sure we as a country are going in the right direction that's not only good for the environment, but good for the economy, and ultimately creating the 21st century grid that we need? That technology is here. It's been invented in the United States. It's at scale. It's just, as you pointed out, it's some of the 19th and 20th century technologies that are dumping a ton of money into preventing us from scaling.
The buggy whip manufacturers are strongly opposing the Henry Fords of the world. Ron Resch, can you stick around?
Absolutely.
I'd like to ask you, A, what kind of products are there out there? What do people know about, need to know about? What are the innovations? And B, when you 3 blocks from here, walk around the offices in the Senate office building or in the Dirksen building or whatever, what kind of reception are you getting? What are people saying to you? We'll be right back with Ron Resch, the president and CEO of the Solar Energy Industries Association. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Ron Resch, president and CEO of Solar Energy Industries Association. The SEIA.org is the website. SEIA.org is the website. Ron, we were talking about solar energy. Number one, what are the new products that people need to know about? I was asking you about, can you just replace, if you're going to re-roof your house, can you roof it with solar panels or with even solar shingles? And number one. And number two, you were talking about community solar, like community garden gardens. Give us some information. What are the products out there that people need to know about?
Yeah, I think the solar industry is very different than what people actually perceive it to be. It's very entrepreneurial, very inventive. Companies like Dow Chemical out of Michigan are manufacturing a roofing shingle that literally a roofer can go in with a nail gun, put a couple of nails in, and then the shingles actually snap together. They look fantastic, just like regular composite asphalt shingles, but they're actually generating electricity. So as your roof starts to get old and it's time to replace the shingles, replacing it with solar is just a small incremental cost, and it's going to produce a significant amount of your electricity.
Now somebody says, but I live in Michigan. I don't live in Arizona. Now, I lived in Germany for a year. I know the climate is almost identical to Michigan, except it's cloudier. And Germany, they had one day this last summer, 74% of the total, or 75% of the total electricity for the country was generated by rooftop solar.
Well, that's right, and I think it just shows that if solar works well in Germany, it's going to work beautifully in the United States. And on average, we have 50 to 60% more sunlight in the United States than we do in Germany.
Right.
And that's any place, right? So if you can grow tomatoes in your backyard garden, you absolutely can put solar up on your roof.
So that's your metric.
Well, it's even lower than that, but certainly everybody now they're
well, we lived in Vermont.
Tomatoes now.
We were living in the mountains of Vermont. I mean, that's as north and as cold as it gets, and we grew tomatoes. So I don't,
I think that's exactly right. But as you were saying, there's a lot of other innovation that's going on. Let's say you live in a condo or you're a renter, and you can't put solar on your roof. There's new products available in a number of different states that are called community solar, in which you may be putting solar on a landfill or some brownfield area, and then people individually buy into that solar farm and then get the benefit of that solar electricity. So you might buy one share of it, and it might generate all your electricity that you need for your apartment or your home.
When we lived in Portland, Oregon, we lived in a floating home community, and it had a parking lot. The houses were out in the river, but the parking lot was up on land, and it was covered. And I suggested, I was on the board, and I said, hey, why don't we talk to one of these solar companies about coming in and putting solar on the roofs? And, it never went anywhere. I mean, sometimes boards get bureaucratic and things. But is that kind of thing happening? Is that practical?
Across the country.
Or is that just a wacky idea?
No. Absolutely. It's happening across the country. And I would challenge you, Tom, next time you get in an airplane and you take off out of National or BWI or any place else, look down at all the buildings that you can see in the first 10 minutes of the flight, and look at all of that available roof space that's just sitting there baking in the sun. I mean, this is an untapped resource. This is where we can be rolling out solar panels and really tapping into our domestic energy and saving those companies a huge amount of money.
This is electricity that we're just kind of whizzing away. I mean,
it's here today, gone tomorrow. I mean,
Okay, so how does community solar work? How do you do it if you're, I'm in a neighborhood. I'm in a neighborhood. I live in a marina. There's a homeowners association. It's 170 of us down there who live full time down, and
so one of the biggest challenges, you have to be in a state that allows community solar, right? So again, we are chipping away at the rules that have been placed in the last 100 years to protect utilities. Right. And certain states allow community solar. And if you go to our website, we've got a page on community solar. You can learn all about which states have it.
Okay.
And then
the website is seia.org.
That's exactly right. And if you don't find what you want on that website, then certainly just Google community solar. And what you'll find is that there are a number of developments happening around the country that allow you to buy into it. And it's designed literally very much for the community. So there may be 100 families that buy into a small solar farm, and you either pay money up front or you can sign a power purchase agreement and just purchase the electricity that comes from that solar farm over a period of time.
What kind of reception? I mentioned before, I wanted to know what happens when you walk into the offices of members of the House of Representatives of the Senate, which are just a couple of blocks from here. What are you finding?
Well, I mean, most of them don't really have a good understanding of what's happening in the solar industry. I mean, today we're one of the fastest growing industries in the United States. Just to give you a perspective, this last quarter we grew by about 80% from where we were last year. Wow. We now employ 145,000 people in the United States, and there's over 6,000 companies in the solar industry just in the United States alone. So the first thing I find is that members of Congress really don't understand the scale of the industry, how much it's changed both from the technology perspective and how costs have come down. And just to give you a perspective, in the last 3 years, the costs have come down by more than 50%. And so we're very cost competitive.
In 3 years?
In just the last 3 years. And we see.
So this is Moore's Law at work. I mean, this is the same thing with computers. Every 2 years, the capacity doubles, the price halves.
Exactly right. The more we scale up manufacturing, the more competition we have in installers, the lower the cost is to consumers.
Remarkable. So what can people do? What can individuals do to even if they don't have the ability to put solar on their house or to buy community solar, to help our country become more solarized?
Well, I think first thing that they can do is get involved with a solar action network. And SEIA has a grassroots capability, not only of companies, but individuals. And again, just go to our website, seia.org, and sign up, where we'll send you information on what's happening at the state level, what's happening at the federal level, and you can become a voice in the energy debate that's happening in this country. Because ultimately, in order for the members of Congress and the senators and even the administration to move aggressively on solar, they need to hear from the public. And when we do polling, we find that 92% of all Americans favor greater development and use of solar energy in this country. I mean, 92%, that's more popular than ice cream in this country right now. And I think it really shows that we have the capability as a country to have a voice in what this energy mix is. We shouldn't just let the oil and gas industries dictate what our energy policy is going to be.
No,
but people have to get
my
involved.
understanding is that Texas and Iowa both get more than 20% of their electricity now from wind. Are you guys collaborating with or competing with the wind industry?
We work very closely with the wind industry, both at the federal level, at the state level, and the communications about what's happening, the change. Because we're both new technology.
Are they typically separate companies, though?
Well, actually, we have a lot of similar companies who do both wind development and solar development for utility scale projects. But remember, solar is infinitely scalable from one cell on the back of a cell phone all the way to 1 million solar panels in the desert in the Southwest, where you typically see wind in large wind farms.
Right.
So the business model is very different, and ultimately there's a lot of different companies in the solar space that wouldn't participate in wind.
Right. Fascinating.
But we work together. And the bottom line is, how do you make change in this country? How do you chip away at an energy infrastructure that's been in place for 50 years? And that's coal, and natural gas, and nuclear
really
energy.
150 years.
150 years.
1856 was when Colonel Titus drilled the first commercial oil well in Titusville, or Colonel Drake in Titusville, Pennsylvania.
That's right.
That's and that's the 19th century. I mean, why are we using 19th century fossil fuels that imperil our planet? But even setting that aside, that are absurdly expensive, particularly when you consider the externalities. When this we could have a renaissance in construction here in the United States. Good work you're doing God's work. Ron Resch, President and CEO of the Solar Energy Industries Association, SEIA.org. Get over there and sign up. Ron, thanks for dropping by.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking.